A rifle butt cracked against the front door hard enough to split the wood. Then a second blow. Then a man's voice, low, told whoever was inside to come out and die quiet. Inside the dark house, a woman set a lamp on the floor so it wouldn't throw her shadow. She slid 2 brass shells into a battered shotgun and snapped it shut. A dog pressed against her boot, one eye gone milk white, the other fixed on the door. Outside, 3 hired killers spread across the yard, sure this would take a minute. They had been told the rancher was gone and only his new wife remained. They had been told she was soft. They had been told she was fat and slow and frightened. Her name was Hattie. What those 3 men learned in the next 10 minutes, none of them lived to repeat. Stay with me here. Now, to understand what happened in that yard, you have to back up about 6 weeks. You have to start with a wedding nobody in Crooked Spur wanted to attend, except to laugh. Silas Brennan owned the biggest cattle operation in that stretch of the Montana Territory. 2,000 head, good water, a long green valley that other men looked at the way starving dogs look at a butcher's window. He was 41, hard through the shoulders, quiet the way men get when they've buried more friends than they'd like. And he had a problem that no amount of cattle could fix. A company had come into the valley. They called themselves the Cascade Land and Cattle Syndicate, but everybody just called them the company. They bought ranches, and when a man wouldn't sell, that man tended to have accidents. A fence cut here, a barn fire there. A rider who went out one morning and came back across his own saddle. The company wanted Silas gone because Silas owned the Keystone. Take his land and his water rights, and the whole valley fell to them like a row of dominoes. They'd offered to buy. He'd said no. So they'd moved to the next step, which was killing him. And the law, such as it was, sat in the company's pocket. Here's the thing about a single man with no heirs. If he dies, his land goes to auction and the company buys it cheap. But a married man with a wife has someone to inherit, someone to hold the deed and fight in court. A wife muddied the water. A wife bought time. So Silas needed a wife, not for love, for a signature and a witness and a body that the company couldn't simply erase. And the only unmarried woman in Crooked Spur willing to take a marked man was Hattie Doyle. Hattie was the baker's daughter. Her father had died the winter before, and she ran the ovens alone, up before dawn, arms dusted white to the elbow. She was a big woman, broad and heavyset, and the town had made its mind up about her years back. They called her names behind the counter while they bought her bread, which tells you everything about that town. The boys at the saloon laid bets on whether Silas could even lift her over the threshold. The women clucked that he must be desperate, marrying that. The preacher who married them smirked through the whole thing. Hattie stood through all of it without blinking. She wore a plain gray dress and she held a small bunch of dried flowers, and she looked Silas dead in the eye when she said the words. And when the preacher told Silas he could kiss the bride, Silas didn't, and Hattie didn't seem to expect him to. They both knew the deal. He needed a name on a deed. She needed out from under that bakery and the whole town that grinned at her over their morning loaves. She arrived at the ranch with 3 things: a carpet bag with her clothes, a battered single-shot shotgun that had been her father's, and a dog, a blue heeler with one eye milked over white and the other one sharp as a tack. Biscuit, she called him, and that dog never walked more than a foot from her boot heel. When the ranch hands laughed at the name, Hattie just looked at them, and something in that look shut the laughing off quick. Silas gave her the big bedroom and took the small one. He showed her the rifles over the mantel, the root cellar, the well. He told her plain what she'd married into. He told her about the company, about the men who'd already died, about the offers and the threats. He figured she'd want to know what she was standing in front of. Hattie listened. Then she asked him one question. She asked how many guns the company could put in a saddle on short notice. Silas thought it was a strange thing for a baker's daughter to ask. He said maybe a dozen, but they liked to send 3 or 4 for wet work, to keep it quiet. Hattie nodded like she was filing that away, and she went to feed her dog, and Silas stood there feeling like he'd missed something but couldn't say what. That was the setup. A marked man, a mocked woman, a one-eyed dog, and a company that wanted them both in the ground. Now here's where it turns. About 3 weeks into the marriage, word came up from the railhead at Junction City. A buyer wanted 400 head cash, but the deal had to close in person, and it had to close that week. For Sailors, it was a lifeline. 400 head sold meant money for lawyers, money to fight the company in a real court back east. He couldn't say no. But the railhead was 2 days' ride each way. He didn't want to go. He looked at Hattie across the supper table, and he said it plain, that leaving her alone on the ranch was leaving her alone with a target painted on the house. He offered to take her with him. He offered to leave 2 of the hands behind. Hattie buttered a piece of bread. She said the hands should go with him, all of them, because a cattle drive needed every rider, and a man arriving at a railhead looking weak was a man who got cheated. She said she'd be fine. She said it the way you'd say the sky was blue. Silas argued. Hattie didn't. She just kept being right quietly until there wasn't much left to argue about. The truth was the deal would save the ranch, and the ranch was the whole point. So at dawn, he and his 4 hands pushed 400 head south toward Junction City, and the ranch house got small behind them, and Hattie stood on the porch with her dog and watched them go. The company had a man watching the road. Of course they did. He counted the riders, counted the cattle, and rode hard the other direction to tell his bosses that Silas Brennan had just left his new wife alone with no men on the place. The fat one. The baker's girl. The company decided this was the gift they'd been waiting for. Kill the wife, burn the house, and when Silas came galloping home to a smoking ruin, take him on the open road where nobody would ever find the body. Clean. Final. The whole valley theirs by autumn. They sent 3 men, the best they had. A long-faced killer named Royce who done this kind of work from Texas to the Dakotas. A younger one called Pip who liked it too much. And a heavy, slow-talking man named Gunderson who carried a sawed-off and never said more than he had to. 3 professionals to murder 1 frightened woman. They figured they were bringing a cannon to kill a sparrow. They figured wrong, but they wouldn't know that for a while yet. They came in the late afternoon of the 2nd day, when the light was going gold and long. Hattie was in the yard when she saw the dust. 3 riders spread wide instead of bunched, which is how men ride when they don't want a single rifle to cover all of them at once. She'd seen riders come in like that before in another life. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She called Biscuit to her, walked back into the house at an unhurried pace, and bolted the door. Then she did something strange for a frightened woman. She blew out every lamp but one, and that one she set on the floor in the back room. She filled a bucket of water and set it by the kitchen. She took down Silas's rifles, 3 of them, and laid them on the table along with every box of cartridges in the house. And last, she took her father's old single-shot shotgun, the battered one, and leaned it by the front window where she could reach it without looking. The riders stopped at the edge of the yard. Royce, the long-faced one, cupped his hands and called out, friendly as a neighbor, that they were just looking for a place to water their horses. Hattie didn't answer. Royce called again, said they meant no harm, said come on out, ma'am, let's talk, still nothing. And in that silence all 3 men understood that she knew. She wasn't fooled. She was waiting. Royce nodded to the others. They stepped down off their horses and pulled their guns and started toward the house from 3 directions, the way they'd done it a dozen times. Royce went straight for the front door. That's when the rifle butt cracked against the wood and the second blow split it, and a low voice told her to come out and die quiet. Hattie did not come out. From inside the dark house, calm as you please, she said the only thing she'd say to them all night. She said, "Last chance to ride off, boys." And Royce laughed. He actually laughed. He told her to put down whatever broom she was holding. Then everything went still. The wind dropped. The horses stamped. For one long breath, every man in that yard believed this was already over, that the next 10 minutes were just the cleanup. They were comfortable, they were sure. And being sure is the most dangerous thing a man can be. That was the false calm. Now the trigger. A floorboard creaked on the side porch. Gunderson, the heavy one with the sawed-off, had circled around to the kitchen door, and he put his shoulder to it to bust it in. He never got the chance. A gray and blue shape came out from under the porch, low and silent and fast, and Biscuit's teeth closed on the back of Gunderson's knee. The big man bellowed and spun, and that spin saved Hattie a shot, because the kitchen door stayed shut and Gunderson was suddenly busy trying to kick a dog off his leg in the dark. Here's where the whole thing changed shape, because up to this second, those three men thought they were killing a wife, a nuisance, a loose end. But the moment that dog hit Gunderson and the woman inside didn't panic, the moment they realized the house was dark on purpose and the lamp was set low on purpose, and she told them their last chance like she meant it, they understood they weren't here to murder somebody. They were in a fight, and worse than a fight. Because if a baker's wife could plan like this, then somebody had lied to them about who lived in this house, and a man in their trade learns fast that when the job is wrong, the only way out is to make sure nobody's left to tell it crooked. No witnesses. Not the woman. Not each other's mistakes. Just finish it and ride. That's a different thing than murder for hire. That's three frightened professionals, and frightened professionals make noise, and noise was exactly what Hattie wanted. Gunderson got his boot into the dog and Biscuit tumbled off and vanished back under the porch, unhurt, circling for another opening. Gunderson, mad now and limping, forgot his orders and put 2 barrels of buckshot through the kitchen door. The blast tore the door half off its hinges. And in the muzzle flash, for half a second, the inside of the house lit up bright as noon, and Gunderson saw that the kitchen was empty. There was nobody there to kill. Just an overturned table and that low lamp throwing shadows the wrong way. He'd given away his exact position with that flash, and he'd emptied both barrels doing it. From the dark hallway, calm and flat, came the boom of a rifle. 1 shot. Gunderson sat down hard in the doorway and did not get up. The slow-talking man never said another word. Now, I want to stop right here, because this is the moment the whole story turns on, and I want you to feel it. A professional killer just walked up on a house expecting a sparrow, and the sparrow put a rifle ball through him in the dark on the first shot in the half-second of his own muzzle flash, while a one-eyed dog kept him too rattled to think straight. That is not luck. Nobody is that lucky. That is a person who has done this before, who was taught, who has stood in the dark and waited for men to give themselves away and made them pay for it, and who walked away from that life to go bake bread in a town that laughed at her. The town had it all wrong. They had it backwards. The most dangerous person in the whole valley had been selling them their morning loaves. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because the back half of this story is the part nobody in Crooked Spur ever forgot. All right, back to the yard. Royce and Pip heard the rifle shot and heard Gunderson go quiet, and the friendly was gone out of Royce's voice for good. He shouted Gunderson's name. Nothing answered but the wind. Pip, the young one who liked it too much, suddenly didn't like it so much. He called over to Royce that something was wrong, that maybe they should pull back to the barn and think. Royce told him to shut up and circle the house. They split. Royce went left toward the front, Pip went right toward the back, both of them moving fast and low, both of them rattled now and not bothering to stay quiet, which was the whole point. Inside, Hattie tracked them by sound. She'd lived in this house 3 weeks, and she'd spent a good part of that time walking every board, learning which ones creaked, learning what the windows showed at what angle. While the town laughed about the fat newlywed, she'd been mapping her ground. A scout's habit. You don't lose it. She moved to the front room and waited by the window with the rifle. Royce was clever. He didn't cross in front of the glass. He kept to the wall and worked toward the broken front door, and he was good enough that she couldn't get a clean look at him without leaning out and getting her own head shot off. So she didn't try. She set the rifle down. She picked up her father's old single-shot shotgun, the battered one, the one the men had laughed at. And she did the thing she'd learned long before flour ever dusted her hands. She made him come to her. She let her boots scuff the floor just once, just enough. Royce heard it and knew where she was, and a man who knows where you are stops being careful about where he is. He came through the broken doorway fast, gun up, swinging toward the sound. But Hattie wasn't where the sound was. She'd thrown her voice the only way that works in the dark. She'd scuffed one spot and stepped 2 paces off it, and Royce's gun was pointed at empty floor when the shotgun went off from 4 feet to his side. At that range, the old gun didn't need to be pretty. Royce went down and stayed down, and Hattie broke the shotgun open, thumbed out the spent shell and slid a fresh one in without looking, the brass finding the breech like her hands had done it 10,000 times, because they had. 2 down, 1 left. And the one left was the young one, Pip, who was around the back of the house, listening to his whole world fall apart in the space of 2 minutes. He'd come to help murder a baker's wife. Now both the men he rode in with were dead in the dirt, and the only sound from the house was a woman calmly reloading a shotgun in the dark. Pip ran. I won't dress it up. He broke for the barn where the horses were, figuring to grab a mount and get clear and never speak of this place again. And he might have made it, but he forgot about the dog. Biscuit had been working the edges of the whole fight, low and patient, that one good eye missing nothing. When Pip broke for the barn, the healer was already moving, already cutting the angle the way that breed cuts a stray steer back into the herd. He didn't bite this time. He didn't have to. He just got in front of Pip, snarling, darting, and a man running scared in the dark from a dog he can't quite see will do what cattle do. He'll turn. He'll go where the dog isn't, which is exactly where the dog wants him. Biscuit turned Pip away from the barn and the horses and ran him straight back toward the house, toward the porch, toward the woman who just stepped out the front door into the last of the light with the shotgun leveled. Pip stopped. His chest heaved. He looked at the gun, and he looked at the woman holding it, and he looked at the 2 dead men in the yard, and whatever he'd been told about this job, it sure hadn't been this. He dropped his pistol in the dirt and put his hands up and started to babble that he was just hired, that he didn't even want to come, that please, please. Hattie didn't shoot him. That's the part that mattered, and it's the part that tells you who she really was. A killer would have finished him. She wasn't a killer. She was something rarer and harder to be. She was a protector, and the difference is everything. She told Pip to lie down flat on his belly with his hands behind his back. He did it so fast he nearly knocked himself out on the ground. She set the shotgun within reach, took the coil of rope off the porch peg, and tied his wrists, then his ankles, knots quick and ugly and unbreakable. Then she dragged him to the corral fence and roped him to a post, and she did the same with Royce, who was hit but breathing, and she even hauled Gunderson out, but Gunderson was past roping. Then she sat down on the porch step with the shotgun across her knees, and her dog climbed up next to her and put his head on her boot, and she scratched his ears, and they waited for morning. She didn't tremble. She didn't cry. She'd done all this before, in worse places, against worse men, and she'd learned a long time ago that the shaking comes later, in private, where nobody can use it against you. Silas had felt it in his gut a full day's ride away. He'd closed the cattle deal, taken the cash, and then some itch he couldn't name had made him leave his hands to drive the empty wagons home slow while he pushed his horse all night. He came up the valley at dawn with the sun behind him, half expecting to see a burned house and a column of smoke, his heart going like a hammer. What he saw instead stopped him cold in the saddle. The house stood whole. There was a body laid under a blanket by the woodpile, decent and covered. And roped to his own corral fence in the gray morning light were two living men, hands bound, heads down, beaten. And on the porch step sat his wife, the woman the whole town mocked, the baker's daughter he'd married for a signature, with a one-eyed dog at her feet and a shotgun across her knees, calmly pressing fresh shells into a loop of her belt one at a time. She looked up at him. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't crying. She just nodded like a woman who'd had a long night and gotten through it, and she said, "They came. I handled it." Silas got down off his horse slow. He walked the yard. He looked at the dead man and the two roped men and the splintered doors and the powder-burned kitchen, and he started to put it together, the shape of what had happened here: 3 professional guns sent to kill, and 1 woman and a dog still standing. He'd known soldiers who couldn't have done it. He'd known lawmen who wouldn't have tried. He looked at her, and he said the only thing a man can say at a time like that. He asked her who she was, not her name. He knew her name. He asked her who she really was, and she told him. Sitting on that porch step with the sun coming up, she told him the thing the town would never have believed about the fat baker's girl they laughed at. Her father, the man everyone in Crooked Spur knew as a quiet baker who'd come west late in life, hadn't always been a baker. He'd been an army scout, one of the best, and before that something rougher he didn't talk about. He'd had a daughter and no son, and so he'd taught his daughter everything he knew: how to shoot, how to wait, how to read ground and read men and throw your voice in the dark, how to break a shotgun and load it blind. She'd been good at it, better than good. There'd been years out west in the hard country when men spoke a name and meant her, and not one of them ever guessed the name belonged to a stout plain girl who could outshoot any of them and would if they pushed. And then the killing had taken everything from her, the way it always does. Friends, her brothers in that work. A whole life burned down to ash one bad season. She'd looked at her hands one morning and decided she was done, done for good. And she'd taken her father and gone east to the smallest town she could find, and she'd buried those hands in flour and dough where they couldn't hurt anybody. She'd let the town laugh. She'd let them think she was soft and slow and frightened. Because a woman they underestimate is a woman they leave alone, and being left alone was all she'd wanted. Until a quiet, desperate rancher needed a name on a deed, and the killing came looking for her one more time, right up onto her own porch. And she'd found out what she'd half hoped and half feared all those years: that the hands remembered, that you don't unlearn it. That when 3 men come to murder you in the dark, the bread and the flour and the years of being laughed at fall away, and you are exactly who your father made you, down to the bone. Silas sat down on the step next to her. He didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. He looked out at the valley that was still theirs, the valley the company had been so sure they'd take, and he understood that everything had changed and nothing the company planned was going to work now, because they'd sent their best 3 men against the one person in 100 miles who could send them all back roped to a fence. The law came 2 days later, dragged out by the company because they had to keep up appearances. But the company had made one fatal mistake. They'd left witnesses. Royce and Pip, roped and alive and scared straight, and not loyal men, just paid men, and paid men sing. Hattie had kept them breathing on purpose. She'd known. A dead assassin tells no tales, but a live one, facing a rope of his own, will trade every name he's got. Pip named the company men who'd hired him. Named the dates, the money, the orders. Named the other accidents in the valley that hadn't been accidents at all. It came out, all of it, in a real courtroom with a circuit judge who didn't owe the company a thing. The syndicate that had been quietly murdering its way across the valley got dragged into the light, and the light was the one thing it couldn't survive. Men went to prison. The company broke apart and sold off and was gone by the next spring. The valley stayed in the hands of the people who'd worked it. And it stayed that way because of a baker's daughter and a one-eyed dog. The town of Crooked Spur didn't know what to do with itself. The same people who'd snickered at the wedding now couldn't meet Hattie's eye over the bakery counter because they'd all heard the story by then. The three guns and the dark house and the woman who handled it. The boys who'd bet on whether Silas could lift her over the threshold went very quiet on the subject. The women who'd clucked stopped clucking. When Hattie walked down the main street, folks stepped aside, and not from scorn anymore. From a kind of awe they didn't have the words for. Hattie didn't lord it over them. That wasn't in her. She just kept on baking because she liked it, because the work was honest and it didn't take anything from anybody. She kept the bakery and she kept the ranch, and she kept that battered single-shot shotgun by the door, oiled and ready, though she never had to use it again. Word travels in country like that. Word that the Brennan place was guarded by something nobody wanted to test twice traveled fastest of all. As for Silas and Hattie, they'd married for a signature, the two of them, for a deed and a witness and a way to buy time. Neither one had asked for anything else, and neither one had expected anything else. But you live alongside a person through a thing like that. You watch them stand between you and ruin without flinching, and something grows that no preacher's words could have planted. It wasn't sudden. It didn't need to be. It was just two hard, quiet people who'd stopped being alone, and who, after a while, stopped wanting to be. He started taking his coffee on the porch in the mornings where she sat. She started baking the bread he liked without him asking. Small things. The real ones usually are. And the dog Biscuit, that one-eyed blue heeler who'd flushed 3 killers out of the dark. He'd lie between them with his head on his paws, that one good eye drifting shut at last, finally letting himself sleep, because the people he loved were safe and he had decided, the way a good dog decides, that they would stay that way. Years later, when folks in Crooked Spur told the story, and they told it for years, they always started it the same wrong way the town had started it the first time, with the fat girl everybody mocked. They told it that way on purpose, because the whole point was the turn. Because every last one of them had looked at Hattie Doyle and seen something soft and slow and beneath them, and every last one of them had been wrong all the way down. And the lesson sat there in the telling, plain enough that nobody had to say it out loud. You never do know what a person has carried before they came to you. You never do know what those quiet hands learned to do, long before they ever turn to something gentle. So be careful who you laugh at. The person you're so sure is the weakest one in the room may just be the one who walks out of it standing, while 3 men who were sure of themselves get carried out feet first. That night on the porch, with the sun coming up over a valley that was hers now, Hattie reloaded without a tremble and waited for her husband to come home. And he did. And that was the whole of it. The woman everyone mocked, sitting calm in the morning light, having handled it, having in the end saved them all.